but in some cases there was only short sort of undergrowth, but in others there were these hills of, you know, solid stone, and others clumps of bamboo, very, very difficult to move, and we had fires burning, and, or, you know, to try and alleviate the amount of work. At that stage they were just bullying you all the time, yelling and screaming. Later on they initiated an actual amount that every man was expected to dig out and remove, and even that, if you got half the party sick, and they, from the word go, they just forced sick out to work. It meant that others had got to pick up that amount that they couldn't do, you see.
Now, as officers you were working
with
the men, or were you a separate officers' party?
No, not then, we were with the men. And the NIPs made us responsible for those amounts of work, you see, and earth removed, which is a very cunning ruse, you see. So in some ways it, you were telling the men that virtually what work had got to be done, and work with them and doing it. So it didn't behove you very much in the eyes of the men. No. You know? It was a very clever move by the Japs.
What was your own health like at this stage?
I was very lucky. I was young and healthy when I went in, and I was gradually becoming depleted. I must have started getting beriberi after about a couple of months of that.
Now, what was your next camp, or were there other tasks that you did there? I think you mentioned you did some pile driving in that area too.
Oh, well, that was they then established an officer party. There had been, after the terrible Selarang incident, when we all were forced to work, you know, and signed documents. There was another smaller incident with officers when they said that all officers work, and of course we made a representation that this wasn't on, but again, you know, a day elapsed, and the colonel, I think it was Swinton or somebody, said you know, that this is useless. They're quite insistent. So at least they agreed and allowed us to form an officer party. And so as a young subaltern I was put in that.
So, and you were doing pile driving?
And that was pile driving just outside where we'd been working with the men on the cutting.
Yes.
And
how big would that, you're building the piles for a bridge, how big was it? Was it a big bridge, or?
No, most of them were small culverts.
Yes.
You know, a couple of train widths.
Yes.
And you've got to clear that area first and put in the piles. And that was it was quite a good practical way, pretty fundamental. Just a huge cast iron weight about 4 or 5 feet high, and there was one major rope, like a ship's docking rope, on a pulley with transom legs, and then from that there are about 20 other lead ropes, and officers pulled those, and there was one man as a leader who held the big rope at the back, and it was quite tricky for him, because if sometimes something happened, like the thing jammed or the wood suddenly went, he'd get the rope round his neck. So, you know, it wasn't as easy as it looked, you know. and we have had nips, of course, you know, rifles at the ready, sitting there in command, and they'd chant incessantly this sing-song, Ichi ni nasanyo, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. And this went on all day long till your senses were numbed. When we were getting near the time to get home, which was generally about 5 or 6, they, you know, they got a bit jocular, and you'd start yelling out, "One for Churchill," you know, and he'd yell out, "No bloody, one for Tojo," and all that sort of nonsense. But there was no reason why he didn't fall asleep after that lot.
Now this pile driving device, was that assembled on site, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just...
And did the POWs do it, or did the Japanese engineers
we did
do it?
all that. There was definitely an engineers party that handled the weight and the pulley business, you know, in case we sabotaged it, I suppose. But otherwise we had to put up the poles and lash them together. And you know, there was a bit of skullduggery. I can remember sawing off the tops of one of the piles that wouldn't go in, and he'd been giving us hell, you know, about a couple of 100 bangs trying to get it in, and it was obviously hitting rock solid.
Now, when you're driving this into the ground, is this a little creek, maybe a creek line, and the soil is soft, is it? You're able to drive into it?
And sometimes you were fine. You could go in with about 100 bangs and it would drop about 9 inches every time.
Yes.
But there were others who were absolute so-and-sos.
Yes.
They just split. And,
Now, which camp were you in next after? Or did you get ill whilst you were in?
Yes, Chung Kai. It was some onslaught of diphtheria, and I well remember the man who was the pile driver leader with the rope. He died of diphtheria while we're on this, and he'd gone sick in Chung Kai and died, and unfortunately about a week later I contracted dip. That was rather amusing because the doctor that examined me was about 6'6".
Who was he?
I don't remember. Terrible, isn't it? Memory.
Was he a British doctor?
Oh yes, yes. We were entirely Brits then, you see.
Yeah. And not a federated Malay States doctor or anything like that?
No. As I said, I'm not short, but far shorter than he, and I can remember well, he stood in the mosquito drain we dug while I stood outside, and he examined my throat, and he nonchalantly said, "You got dip."
And what do you remember his rank? That might help.
He was a captain.
Captain.
All MOs were captains.
Yes. So I mean, I know that Alexander, Major Dunlop.
Yes.
You know, not Weary.
Not
the
Weary.
other one. You knew the British Dunlop. Did you?
Yes, vaguely. I didn't attend him. See, we normally right through Chung Kai, we would have used our own British MO, who was Ford Cayley.
Oh yes.
And Cayley would do things, but this man was he was in charge of the dip ward,